The sharp rhythm of morning drills was suddenly disrupted by a loud announcement echoing from the base loudspeakers. Attention all cadets! The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, will be visiting our base this week. Prepare for his arrival with utmost discipline. A wave of shock rippled through the Coast Guard Training Center at Cape May. The news swept across the grounds like wildfire. Nervous chatter and murmurs of disbelief replaced the steady sound of boots hitting the pavement. While the base had previously hosted high-ranking officials and dignitaries, a visit from a sitting president was unprecedented. Cadets immediately straightened their uniforms, anxiety growing with thoughts of inspections and high-level scrutiny. Amid the murmuring crowd stood Cadet Olivia Carter, a focused and determined young woman. She had faced the brutal challenges of training with a single-minded purpose: to honor her late father, a respected Coast Guard veteran. But unlike her fellow cadets, Olivia's reaction wasn't just excitement. As the reality of the announcement sunk in, she felt an unexpected knot form in her chest. A strange tension pulled at her insides, something she couldn't quite understand. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Still, the weight in her chest lingered like a shadow. Her father, James Carter, had passed away a few years earlier. A man known for his quiet heroism, James never boasted about the medals and honors he had earned. In fact, one of his most repeated sayings had been, "Real heroes don't need recognition." Olivia hadn't heard his name spoken with admiration since his funeral. Maybe that was why this moment felt so heavy, because her father had given everything to this country, but had done so away from the spotlight. That night, lying in her bunk, Olivia couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were scattered, circling around, the unease that refused to fade. Something about the president's upcoming visit felt oddly personal. The next morning, as she opened her locker, her heart skipped a beat. There, tucked between her gear, was a piece of folded paper that hadn't been there before. She looked around cautiously, but no one seemed to be watching her. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the note. It contained just 4 words, written in hurried black ink. "Ask him about James." Her breath hitched. James, her father. Her hands tightened around the note. How did this even get here? Who knew about her connection to James Carter? No one on the base ever brought him up. He wasn't a public figure, just a loyal officer with a decorated but quiet service record. Was this someone's idea of a prank? Or was it something more? Was there a truth about her father she had yet to discover? The question haunted her as the big day arrived. The air on base was electric with energy. As Air Force One landed, its engines thundered like an oncoming storm. Cadets stood in perfect formation, eyes ahead, shoulders squared. Excitement buzzed just under the surface of their disciplined exterior. Then, President Donald Trump stepped out of the aircraft, surrounded by Secret Service agents. His presence was commanding, and as he looked over the assembled cadets, he smiled proudly. "You are the finest men and women this country has to offer," he said, his voice strong and clear. "The United States Coast Guard is the best of the best. I'm honored to be here today." A wave of applause broke out, controlled but enthusiastic. As he moved along the rows, shaking hands, he suddenly stopped in front of Olivia. Her heart thundered in her chest as his sharp gaze locked onto the nameplate on her uniform. "Carter," he said softly, his expression shifting. For a second, he seemed momentarily lost in thought. Then he asked, almost to himself, "James Carter, any relation?" Olivia swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. He was my father." A hush fell over the cadets around them. Even the nearby Secret Service agents seemed to sense something unusual. The president looked at her with a softened expression, one filled with something close to reverence. "Your father was a true American hero," he said. Gasps and quiet whispers rippled through the ranks. Olivia's thoughts swirled in confusion. Her father had been respected, certainly. But this reaction? What was President Trump talking about? He turned to one of his aides urgently. "Where's that file? Someone bring me the Carter report." A wave of murmurs spread. The Carter report? Olivia had never heard of such a thing. What was this about? Moments later, a Secret Service agent retrieved a file from a briefcase and handed it to the president. He flipped through it slowly, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up and spoke again. "Your father didn't just save lives during that hurricane, Olivia. He saved me." A gasp echoed through the field. Olivia went numb. Trump continued, his tone more solemn. "Years ago, I was visiting an area devastated by a storm, helping coordinate relief efforts. The weather turned rapidly, unexpected, brutal. We were trapped. The storm raged around us. I didn't think I'd make it." He looked directly at Olivia. "But your father, James Carter, refused to leave anyone behind. He pulled me onto a rescue boat with his own hands. He saved my life." Olivia's mind reeled. She had never heard this story, not from her father, not from anyone. Her father had saved the President of the United States and never mentioned it. Trump closed the file. "I told him I'd ensure the world knew what he did, but he refused recognition. He told me, the real heroes are the ones who don't make it home." Olivia blinked back tears. That sounded exactly like her father. The president straightened, looking around at the assembled base. "This moment is long overdue," he said. "I made James Carter a promise, and today I intend to keep it." Turning to his staff, he declared, "Prepare the Medal of Honor ceremony. James Carter's name will be honored across the nation." The cadets broke into applause, some visibly emotional. Olivia's hands trembled. Finally, her father was getting the recognition he deserved. But as the ceremony loomed, one thought clung to her like a shadow. Who had left her that note, and why? That night, Olivia sat alone on her bunk, the note in her hand. Someone knew this was coming. Someone wanted her to ask. The next morning, before the medal ceremony, Olivia made a quiet detour to the base's archive building. Dusty and dimly lit, it was filled with rows of old files, mission records, and personnel logs. As she combed through the stacks, an elderly janitor emerged from the shadows. "Looking for something, Cadet Carter?" he asked, eyes sharp despite his age. Olivia hesitated. "Did you know my father?" The man nodded slowly. "Knew him well. But you won't find the full truth here," he said, gesturing toward a small locked cabinet. "The real story's in there." Her heartbeat quickened. "What do you mean?" Without another word, the janitor produced a worn key and unlocked the cabinet. Inside, Olivia found an old, yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Unknown Coast Guard Officer Saves Dozens Before Disappearing." She read in silence, her hands shaking. The article described how, after rescuing Trump, her father had gone back into the storm alone to save a stranded family trapped on a capsized boat. Their odds were slim. But James Carter had never hesitated, and never told a soul. "Why isn't this in the official records?" Olivia whispered. "Because he didn't want it to be," the janitor said. Her throat tightened. "Did you leave the note?" The man nodded. "I was there that night. I was part of the rescue team. I wanted you to know the whole truth before. The world only got part of it." "Why now?" she asked. "Because I needed to be sure you were ready to carry his legacy." Emotion flooded her chest, but she stood firm. She wasn't just his daughter, she was his continuation. His legacy would not fade into silence. Back on the training grounds, the crowd gathered. Reporters, cameras, cadets, and officers stood in respectful silence. Trump stepped to the podium beside a glass case holding the Coast Guard Medal of Honor. "We are gathered here to honor a man who represented the very best of this country," he began. James Carter. Olivia stood at attention, her eyes fixed forward, her father's memory burning bright in her heart. "Cadet Carter," Trump turned to her. "Today, on behalf of the United States of America, we award this medal